Vitaly, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov, press secretary of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov, the chair at the Kremlin. It is important that you get the information to spend a day with the Tomahawk missiles received in Ukraine, and with permission to shove them into the title of the sovereign territory of the Russian Federation. Peskov, Kurds in Russia are not going to hand over the Ukrainian temples themselves. They are going to launch missiles about the fate of the topic in the process of the American temples of the services. And Ukraine itself has intelligence information on allegedly using direct missiles, and the American temples of the service will be guided by Ukrainian missiles, and on America, on the body of the Russian Federation. With this rank, the entire statement of the press secretary of the President of Russia, I am ironic with a direct look at the sunsets. For the fact that in Moscow there will be counselors from obtaining a staff for an average participant in the conflict. And the Americans, not Ukrainians, will behave like blows. Peskov's statement was not made in a dose after an interview with President Trump's representative Keith Kellogg appeared in Yakima, having firmly seen for torture, allowed American Tomahawk missiles to be thrust into Donald Trump for strikes on the sovereign territory of the Russian Federation. Buckets, I will say that the topic of the interview did not have any new information submitted to President Trump. I, as a rule, do not participate in real political honors turned off, having analyzed those statements, and still really praise the decision. President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, their Secretary of State Mark Ruby. However, Pozadov firmly did not say that Ukraine and Tomahawk missiles should be used for strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation, and did not say that Donald Trump had seized the residual missile defense solution on Ukraine's missiles. We also know about Tilka Austin from Oyster near New York. The Ukrainian president, having discussed the Tomahawk missile bolt from Trump, and the American president is really in torture. And the presidential administration with the staff received. The very fact that the topic of the Tomahawk bolt is actively discussed. And even before the discussion, even before the topic, I joined the ranks of the Donald Trump administration, as far away as the vice president from the received states did not go to Moscow. The fact that Washington did not have enough to hold a Tomahawk bolt on the territory of the Russian Federation and hire such a dump for Ukraine. It is possible to counsel another raising of the topic of Tomahawks in the topic, and not on the tribute of the missiles themselves. Prote, that Trump, joking about the look of a guide, lead to that hybrid war, having unpacked Putin about Ukraine in NATO, and obviously not the adoration of the Russian president in Ukraine. Donald Trump with such a rank may demonstrate to his Russian colleague that he is also ready for escalation. And I'm also Putin of Trump's propositions. And that is why they have sent their drones so that they fly over NATO's temple facilities and paralyze the windy collapse in Europe, since the United States will be able to praise the unacceptable for the Russian solution. The transfer of the Dolobium missiles of Ukraine, and the strikes of the dropped forces of Ukraine on strategic objects in the Russian Federation. And you and I are fine, of course, they also reach the Russian capital. And such a rank can be assigned to the Yak by the Vyskov object of Russia, as well as by the shading center of the Vyskov command of the Russian Federation in Moscow. Obviously, there has not been a period of Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Overstated Tilke contagion on discounts. Putin direct such threats seriously. And the style of the Russian and American presidents is that Putin does not make his threats in words. We can smell the sight of the Russian president declaring intentions. Here the crocs are visco-technical in nature. We, of course, are no longer in a dose of wine, and Russia is really ready for real temples, where there is allegedly a decline in Ukraine. And hybrid guilt is allegedly a decline from Ukraine and a member of NATO. Putin will be handed more heavily into those political processes in neighboring Ukraine. We are really following the fate of Russian special services and Naaman. And Trump, until today, is settling in on himself with verbal and pogroms. And Putin may just not be angry with Tomahawk. I turned off the interview with Jay Devens and Keith to the fact that, in truth, those missiles will not be in Ukraine. And Ukraine will not be refueled for theirs on the territory of the Russian Federation. In Tim, the fact that Ukraine is overgrown with spin and missiles. We can squeeze out objects on the territory of the Belgorod and Bryansk regions of the Russian Federation Tomahawks. In May, the layout is seriously for the restlessness of the Russian political. And Dmitry Peskov's statements about the fact that the Tomahawk test is about her and will be up to average. In the American Vikov rocket. It is extremely difficult to test Trump's sunsets, so that without even thinking about the real Tomahawk in Ukraine for a day, I will beat a direct conflict from the Russian Federation. And here is where the greatest test of who is who for Trump is upholstered on dates in Ukraine. Tomahawks are not inhabited. And you are a flail. And Putin is tomahawking into Ukraine, allegedly an average direct conflict, and with the received states. I'm up to a direct gazette between two nuclear superpowers from the outside world. By accident. I didn't want Putin. The Russian president, having demonstrated his unpreparedness before, and with a real prove. Dyakuyu. Overestimate the topic of the channel, subscribe to it and social channels in Patreon, Coffee, and Donatello. And these resources help to develop functions and sponsorship on YouTube itself.